Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Springbok press conference with Springbok coach Jacques Nienaber. Most of you have joined our press conferences before, so you know the drill. We are quite pressed for time as usual, so we are going to keep it short and sharp. Can I please request that if you ask your question, you ask one question rather than two or three in one question, please, so that we can get through more media if possible. And then just as usual, we'll keep the Afrikaans questions for the last 6-7 minutes or so. So without further ado, you know the drill. Please just lift your hand when you have a question, and yes, we'll fire away. Mubin?
Good afternoon, Zina. Good afternoon, Jacques. My question to you, Jacques, is how has the Bulls and the Stormers players come into the camp? Has it been a smooth sail for them so far? And then can you just tell us about the selection as well? Is the door still open for players like Dylan Lades and Raymond Rule still to make it in the future? Thanks.
Yeah, and in your first part is about the Bulls and the Stormers guys. Yeah, obviously they've been with us now for 1.5 days. And obviously the Stormers guys came into camp with smiles on their faces, and the Bulls probably disappointed, which one will would expect, you know, seeing that the final was such a closely contested game. And yeah, so in terms of players from, yeah, we can always, if there's injuries and stuff like that, we can always look to get players in from anywhere. I mean, I don't want to speculate just on the two you mentioned, but players in local competitions, you know.
Nathan?
Thanks, Zina. How's it, Jacques? Jacques, we see more and more players coming back or returning from their European stints. Would you say this is a good for SA Rugby, and especially in the lead up to the World Cup? Is this something that you encourage?
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good for the fan as well if players decide to come back from having a stint abroad. And it's obviously nice having them in our environment, because we can obviously look at them in terms of a player management and a player welfare point of view. You know, we've got a little bit more control over the players. When they play abroad, you know, we hope that there's some goodwill between the Springboks and the clubs that they represent, to get some player welfare and to look after the assets, which is both an asset for us and for them. But it just makes it a lot easier when they're in South Africa, you know. So, yeah, it's a good thing if they want to come back. We will always wait for them with open arms.
Craig Lewis?
Thanks, Zina. How's the Jacques? Hope you're well. Jacques, just looking at your squad, I mean, you obviously have quite a few newcomers and guys who've been rewarded for their form in the URC. Just how do you foresee balancing, you know, during the Wales series, sticking with the tried and tested and prioritizing results while also giving, you know, maybe game time to some of the new guys to get them some game time under the belt, knowing that, you know, it's not all that long until the next World Cup, and that could be important to build a bit of depth.
Yeah, I think yeah, we've got a plan with the players. We've got obviously three, hopefully, I think it is three SAA games in November coming up, you know, which would give us a great opportunity to expand and be a little bit creative in terms of team selection. And we've got a plan currently worked out for the year for 2020, where we would like to play players, but that plan changes quickly, determining on the results and determining on injuries, you know. You might think that one player might only play on the end of year tour in the SAA game, and if you pick up 2 injuries in a position quickly, then that player might start in test matches. So yeah, that will always be something that we will closely monitor. And yeah, that's always the balancing act. And like I mentioned before, I think if you represent your country, you represent a brand that's over 100 years old, you've got a responsibility towards that, and our responsibility is to perform and to make our country proud as the Springboks. If there is an opportunity to maybe expose players to the highest level of international rugby, then we will take that opportunity. But again, like I said, it will be determined by injuries, and it will be determined by momentum that we build.
Percy, is your question in English or Afrikaans? Percy?
Zina, I'll wait for Afrikaans.
Okay, any other English questions? There's only 2 hands up, which was Mubin and Nathan. Grant? Grant, you can fire away.
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Thanks, Jacques. What are you expecting from this Welsh side? Obviously, they've announced their side now. What type of challenge do you expect?
Yeah, I expect a desperate Welsh side, and not because of where they are, because and I can't give an opinion what's going on in their camp, but we've been desperate before as the Springboks when we came back in 2018. So I know what that feels like. So I think that's what we probably face. We will face a team that will be well prepared. They had a lot of preparation time building into this series. And I think they will be well coached, well prepared, and desperate. And again, I'm not saying desperate in the sense that they have to get a victory, but desperate in the sense that purely because I know what it feels like in 2018.
Ken Boland?
Thanks, Zina. Hi, Jacques. Jacques, there's obviously been a lot of focus in the last few weeks on guys like Ifan Ruiz and Elrich Lowe, and deservedly so, given their URC form. Do you feel, though, that there's still a bit of a thing in South African rugby that we're a little bit insular? And I mean, I was speaking with reference to then a guy at the weekend like Jasper Wiese, who puts in an incredible performance in the Premiership final. And yet, his name just doesn't really come into conversations a lot locally. Do you feel like South Africa, we really need to broaden our horizons a bit and fully embrace what's going on in the rest of Europe?
Yeah, if I understand you correctly, Ken, yeah, I think yes, obviously it speaks volumes for the depth that we have, and even if you look at the two gentlemen you mentioned and you look at Dion Fourie in terms of putting in a man of the match performance in the final, and then you look at Jasper Wiese putting a man of match performance in the Premiership, and that's probably where sometimes when we sit here and we discuss players and we say, listen, my job is on a Saturday. If there's Friday night games, we normally get the games about between 4 and 6 hours after they've played. So our job as a coaching staff from the national side, when we are not in camp, is to make sure that we are on every single player that we follow, to make sure that every single game they play, we watch every tackle, every pass, every kick. So when I think if you look at the squad we selected, the names you mentioned and the names that I've mentioned now, I think you can see probably a feather in the cap for the selectors. I think the players that they have selected for this squad are all in form. I think the challenge for us now from a coaching staff is to make sure that we align them. They've been coached now by their franchises for quite some time, and they would be used to their systems. So our challenge will be to align them with us. And some of the players who will come in from locally or come in from abroad, some of them have been part of us for about 60 weeks, 50 to 60 weeks have they been part of us since 2018, almost 40 test matches. So their alignment will probably come a little bit quicker due to experience working with us before. And some guys, although they are in form, will come into our environment and they're not used to how the Springboks do things. And so our challenge is to make sure that we almost bridge that gap as quickly as possible. And I think it's both our responsibility as coaches and leaders and management, and also the players' responsibility to take ownership of that and make sure that they get aligned as quickly as possible. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Jacques. Super. Thank you.
Okay.
Guys, can I please request that those who have asked questions already just lower your hands so that we can see the others. And then with that said, let's go to Kanyiso.
Thank you very much, Zina. Good afternoon, Jacques. I hope all is well. When you look at Saturday's URC final and you look at the Gallagher Premiership final, you look at the Super Rugby final, what kind of rugby picture did those particular matches actually illustrate for you?
I think the common denominator in all those finals were physical intensity. I think, yeah, if you look at, I don't want to go too much into the stats of those three games. Obviously, we follow it closely, but I think there was a physical intensity in all three of those matches, and there's also a massive tactical battle and a battle for territory and a battle for to put the other team under pressure. So I think that was a consistent in all those games, and that's why we say it's nice if our players can play in big games like that, because finals is probably the closest there is to international rugby. But I still think moving up from big finals like that in international competition is still it's a different game playing internationally, because obviously you're playing for your country, and if you don't get the desired result, your country loses, so there's a lot at stake, which I'm not saying there isn't a lot at stake when you play for the URC, but obviously the Stormers fans are Stormers fans, but when you play for South Africa, it's 40, 50, 60 million people that you represent. I don't know what the size of the Stormers fan base would be, but I mean, I hope you get what I'm trying to say. How can I say it? What you play for is just a lot bigger when you represent your country.
Liam?
How are you? How are things there?
Hi, Liam.
We're behind you guys in South Africa. We only got to see the first episode of the documentary series with you guys and the Lions. It was broadcast there last Sunday night. I'm just curious, with Wales coming into you guys now, is it possible for you to just put into context the difference between now and then? How very different a tour it will be in terms of, like, compared to the Lions tour where we had all the restrictions and stuff like that. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how good will that be for South African rugby, and as well for the Springboks in terms of your preparation? How very different is it for you this year compared to last year? You could compare and contrast to both, please. Thank you.
Liam, yeah, no, listen, it will be phenomenal for us, for South Africa. If you think of the fans in South Africa, that we, as the Springboks, we haven't played in front of a crowd since we won the World Cup. We've never performed for our country, in our country, as world champions. So the last time we actually played in South Africa or performed in South Africa was against Argentina at Loftus before we went on the World Cup, the last game of the Rugby Championship. So it's going to be massive for us. And then the same, I think, for the players from Wales. There was a big contingent of them that was on the Lions tour. And it will be awesome. I mean, touch wood, nothing happens going forward, and things stay as normal, or almost back to normal as is. So things in South Africa are almost, is, in my opinion, normal, like it was pre-COVID. Yes, there is still some regulations that we have to oblige by. But it's not at all like it was with the British and Irish Lions, and I must say, looking back at it, it will be a time that would always be remembered. The sacrifices made by both the British and Irish Lions players, management, their families, and the South African players, management, and their families was tremendous, and it speaks volumes for how big a series that is and how big a tournament it is, the British and Irish Lions, how big a deal it is. It's massive. It's, in my opinion, it's the World Cup and that. So the other things are important, Rugby Championship, Six Nations, all that. But I think that is such a unique, I'm talking about uniqueness. I think British and Irish Lions is a unique series, as is World Cup.
Kamba?
Yes,
Thanks, Good afternoon, Jacques. You would have seen last week that there are changes to the Rugby Championship format. I just want to pick your brain on what you think, how the change or the reverting back to, a structure that is more conducive to the amount of rugby being played. What your initial impression of that is?
The Rugby Championship. The Rugby Championship, I think, is 6 games contested over, if I get my sums right, it is contested over 10 weeks. And that it's been like that, except in World Cup years, where the Rugby Championship is a shortened format. And I think the only change to what we normally had is that there's mini tours, 2-week tours. So we play New Zealand twice in South Africa, where in the past we played New Zealand in South Africa 1 week, and then we will play New Zealand away, and then we will play Australia at home and Australia away, and Argentina at home and Argentina away. And now it's just a mini tour. So the 1 year we're going to play Argentina home and away as per normal, but Australia and New Zealand will alternate year on year. So 1 year we will host New Zealand and South Africa, like this year, and then we will play away against Australia. Then the next year, if it's not a World Cup year, then we will host Australia again for 2 test matches in South Africa and play New Zealand 2 test matches away. So I just think if you look, I think the reason why they did it, obviously it reduces the amount of travel, which has a direct influence in cost and also in player welfare. You don't have to cross the different time zones that much. So yeah, for us, listen, it's the same for all the parties involved in the Rugby Championship, and yeah, it's a little bit new, and we have to adapt by it, like all the other teams will have to adapt by it.
Well, we'll take one more question in English, and then we'll switch over to Afrikaans because we are limited for time. So Ross, you can ask your question.
Thanks very much, Zina. How's it, Jacques? In terms of players now, I'm assuming you guys are pretty much up to full complement at the camp. I know that Handra Pollard's still got a French top 14 final. Are you guys waiting for anyone else? And, with being up to full complement, are you now able to, lift the intensity and sort of get to the level of preparation that you're hoping to ahead of the Welsh series?
Ross, no, Andre is obviously still playing, so he's only their finals only over the weekend. But then also we don't have any of our Premiership players who's playing in the Premiership. We don't have them with us. They are only being released according to Regulation 9 of World Rugby, which is a week before the Test match. So they will only join us on Monday. As per regulation, like it normally is. We are fortunate now to get the Japan-based players, the Japanese Rugby Union, and obviously the clubs agreed that the players can start working with us a little bit earlier. So, like I say, sometimes the national unions and the clubs agree with that, and sometimes the national unions and clubs just stay strictly with Regulation 9, and then we will have to oblige by that. So we will only get our Premiership players on Monday.
Guys, that concludes the English section of our press conference. So for our international media, you can tune off now if you'd like. We will now go to Percy for Afrikaans.
Zina, thank you so much. Zina, can I ask you two Afrikaans questions, or should I just stick to one question?
Dis reg, Percy.
Jacques, goeiemôre. Jacques, kan ek vir jou 'n soortgelyke vraag vra rondom jou groepspelers? Is jou groep nog steeds net 43? Het dinge verander sedert die enigste beserings? En hoe was die voorbereiding sover vir jou as afrigter gewees sover?
Percy, ja, nee, ons groep bly 43. Die groep wat ons aangekondig het, is die groep wat ons aangekondig het, so daar het niks veranderinge daar plaasgevind nie. En ja, uit die aard van die saak, mense sal moet sien soos die spelers in die groep inkom, is daar enige beserings en selfs in ons oefeninge kan ons beserings optel en dan moet ons besluit of ons aanpassings gaan maak of nie, maar ons het 43 spelers, so ek dink nie as daar beserings is, ja, nee, ek kan nie, ek weet nie. Ons sal moet kyk waar die beserings en watse posisies dit plaasvind en of ons dan iemand moet inbring en of nie. En Percy, hoe die oefeninge tans gaan, uit die aard van die saak, ons was redelik kreatief geweest in die eerste 2 weke, want ons het 16 spelers gehad, maar daar was nie 'n speler in elke posisie nie, so van die stitte moes slot speel en van die slotte moes flank speel en ons was maar kreatief in terme van as dit gekom het by span taktiek. So ons het meer gefokus op fundamentele vaardighede. Waar nou is ons in 'n goeie posisie waar ons ten minste amper 2 vol spanne het wat posisie spesifiek vol is. Maar definitief een, so ons kan bietjie aan taktiese goed begin werk, Percy. So ja, dis ek dink ons groot uitdaging gaan wees uit die aard van die saak. Ek dink die spelers wat ons wat die keerders gekies het, is spelers wat in vorm is. As jy kyk na die vertonings van die spelers in die finale van die Premiership en ook van die URC kompetisie. Ons groot uitdaging gaan wees om hulle belyn te kry met hoe ons dinge doen by die Springbokke. So en ons het 2 weke om dit reg te kry. So ja, nee, Percy, ons werk hard, so hard as wat ons kan. Ons sal ons Engelse spelers eers kry volgende maandag en dan sal ons so hard werk as wat ons kan om hulle belyn te kry vir 'n baie desperate Wallis.
Jacques, kan ek net vra, as jy is die senior persoon op die platform op die oomblik, en ek bedoel niks snaaks met hierdie vraagie, maar wat is jou opinie oor die Curriebeeker? En as die mees seniorste persoon tans op hierdie platform, kan ek jou vra, kyk jy enigstens na die Curriebeeker eindstryd hierdie week? Wat is die beloning vir die 2 spanne byvoorbeeld, wat nou so hard gewerk het? Kan hulle enigstens die nasionale afrigter se aandag trek hierdie naweek nog, of stel jy as senior nasionale afrigter glad nie belang in Curriebeeker vertonings?
Nee, yes, Percy, uit die aard van die saak stel ek belang in die Curriebeeker. Ek dink, ek en Rassie het nou die dag hieroor gepraat, jy weet, toe Jacques Burger nog by die Griekwas gespeel het ons, soos by die wedstryde plaasvind, as ek sê ons doen, ons kyk na die vertonings van spelers en doen 'n performance analysis op spelers, dan is dit baie wyer as net hierdie groep van 43 wat is aangekondig het. Dit gaan tot by 60, 65 partykeer, jy weet, en ou so Jacques Burger is iemand wat ons 'n paar jaar terug toe hy nog by Griekwas gespeel het, dopgehou het. En ek dink op een van die online meetings wat ons gehad het Rassie sy naam genoem. En ek sê paar weke later is hy gekontrakteer by die Bulle en nou is dit iemand waarna ons kyk, jy weet, en hy is daar ouetjie wat ons dophou en wat ons kyk, hoe tackle hy, hoe pas hy, hoe doen hy sy dinge op die veld, jy weet. So nee, dis definitief iets waarna ons kyk en ek dink as mense kyk na die Curriebeeker finaal hierdie jaar, ek dink as jy gaan kyk na die Pumas en die Griekwas, is uitstekend wat hulle gedoen het om vir alles mense gaan kyk na ek dink hulle vat so, ek dink daar's soveel diepte tans in Suid-Afrika as jy gaan kyk na die twee as ek kan sê Griekwas en Pumas is domestic franchises, die ander 6 franchises is internasionale franchises. As jy vat die Cheetahs gaan volgende jaar in die internasionale kompetisie speel. Dink ek hulle begin so raakvat in terme van die talent wat daar is, jy weet, as jy kyk na die budgets wat daai 2 spanne, die sogenaamde kleiner spanne het, Pumas en 'n Griekwas, jy weet, en daardeur verwys ek nie na iets wat die Bulle of die Cheetahs verkeerd gedoen het nie, ek verwys maar net na die grootheid van hoeveel talent daar in Suid-Afrika is, dat daai 2 spanne dit maak in 'n Curriebeeker finaal, jy weet, en dit is die eerste keer, ek dink sinds eerste keer vir die Pumas ooit, en die eerste keer vir Griekwas sinds 1970, so dit is uitstekend. Nee, is Percy, dit is definitief iets wat ons streng dophou. Jy weet, en selfs as jy dink daar is pony spelers wat ons ek werk naby aan Rassie met die pony spelers. Jy weet daar's oor 100 pony spelers waarna ons kyk in Suid-Afrika en 'n klomp van hulle het in hierdie semifinale gespeel, jy weet. En weer eens as 'n mens gaan kyk, ek dink die Pumas het 1 of 2 pony spelers, maar die Griquas het nie op die stadium 'n pony speler nie, jy weet. En hoe uitstekend het hulle gedoen. En weer eens, ek sê nie die Griquas, ek sê nie die Cheetahs of die Bulle het enigiets iets verkeerd gedoen nie. Ek sê maar net, dit wys vir hoeveel talent is daar. Nee, ons hou hulle definitief fyn dop, Percy.
Guys, we're going to take the last 2 questions, but very quickly, please, Kobus, and then followed by Zian, and then we wrap things up. So, Kobus, you can go.
Baie dankie, Zina. Hallo, Jacques.
Hey, Kobus.
Jacques, ek wil jou vra, in 2007 het die Springbokke die Wêreldbeker gewen toe die Bulls en die Sharks in die Super Rugby eindstryd gespeel het. Is jy hoopvol dat daai URC momentum ook hierdie jaar sal oorspoel na die Springbokke toe?
Ja, weet jy, snaaks genoeg, Zian, ek het nou die dag te praat ek met Victor, te sê ek, ja, weet jy, in 2018 of in 2019 het ons die World Cup gewen, maar ons spanne het nie in semifinale gespeel van Super Rugby nie. Toe stel hy my vinnig op my plek, toe sê, weet jy, ja, in 2007 toe ons die Wêreldbeker gewen het ons 2 spanne gehad wat in die finaal gespeel het. So ja, ek dink, ja, ek hoop daai momentum, en veral die momentum, nie net wat dit by die Bokke create nie, maar die momentum in die land, jy weet, ek dink waar die grootste of die belangrikste faktor vir ons is die fan, die spectator, jy weet, en ek dink daar's lekker momentum en lekker positiewe gevoel onder die mense wat rugby ondersteun, onder die ondersteuners. So ek hoop daai spoel oor na ons, veral as ons nou weer voor ondersteuners kan speel, hoop ek dit laat ons 'n ekstra arm en 'n been groei.
Last question, Zian.
Hi Jacques, goeiemiddag. Alles gaan goed daar. Ek wil net vra wat jou opinie was op Dion Fourie se vertoning in die eindstryd en dan die impak wat hy gemaak het by die Stormers sodat hy teruggekom het en as jy bereid is om te deel min of meer wat sy rol is en wat julle planne is met hom.
Ja, nee, kyk, Dion, ek dink Dion, ek wil nie net oor Dion praat nie. Ek dink as jy gaan kyk na die 43 ouens wat ons in ons groep het, behalwe Johan wat ons nou 'n spesiale projek mee het, Johan Goosen in terme van om hom bloot te stel in ons omgewing, want hy is nog een wat beseer is. Hy's nog 'n speler wat beseer is. Sal ek sê so, kom ons sê 42 spelers wat tans in ons groep is wat nie beseer is nie. Sal ek sê, ek dink die groot ding wat die keerders voorgegaan het is kan ek maar sê konstante goeie spelpyl. Ek dink soos Dion baie keer wen spelers van die wedstryd hulle man of the match performances, maar dit is die konsekwentheid van hulle performances wat ons na gekyk het, jy weet, ouens het consistently goed perform deur die loop van die jaar. So ek dink nie net Dion nie. Ek dink al die ander spelers, ek dink as jy gaan kyk na al ons losvoorspelers, ons het 'n klomp goeie losvoorspelers, jy weet. Ek dink as 'n ou soos Dion inkom, sien 'n ou soos Elrich, hy sien 'n ou soos Evan, Dwayne is nie hier nie, Pieter Steff is daar, jy weet, Sia is daar's 'n klomp, Marcel is daar's 'n klomp uitstaande losvoorspelers wat tans saam met ons is, jy weet, Reinhard Alstedt van Toulouse, wat by ons aansluit, wat in een van die top spanne speel oor see. Ja, so daar's 'n klomp uitstaande spelers. En ja, ek dink die groot ding is hulle is in die groep want hulle het konstant goeie performance ingesit week na week.
Guys, thank you so much for joining our press conference. That concludes our proceedings. We will be sending out a recording shortly, so just keep an eye out for that. Have an awesome day. Bye-bye.
Dankie. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ina. Thanks, Jacques.
Thanks.
Dis Jacques, lekker week.
Ja, selfe.